offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment, and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals? Knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between
Welcome to today's side event at the IDFC Pavilion, and that includes you here in the room and also everyone online. My name is Barbara Schnell and I'm from KfW Development Bank, and I have the honor and pleasure to moderate this wonderful session. So today we will be jointly working on the question financing green hydrogen and its derivatives. What has been achieved thus far? So for the next about 75 minutes, we will gain insights from public as well as private sector. We will hear about relevant investment activities from a commercial bank as well as a bilateral development bank. And finally, we will explore the relevance of Power-to-X for a green energy transition and the transformation of industries. So first of all, why do we come together today and discuss about green hydrogen? Climate change is one of the key challenges of our time, and investing in sustainable technologies is our responsibility. The focus is often on how to cut emissions, especially CO2. But what about the sectors where emissions are difficult to avoid? These so-called hard-to-abate industries, like steel. They form a large part of our global emissions, and reducing them is the key to a greener future. However, emissions from industrial processes increased in 2021, more than reversing the pandemic-related decline from the year before. If we continue along this path, we will not be able to contain global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. So how do we tackle hard-to-abate industries and address the necessary long-term structural changes? The short answer is, it's not easy. One of the more in-depth discussed solutions within the last couple of years is green hydrogen and its derivatives, like ammonia. So green hydrogen can play a key role in decarbonizing industries and enable their sustainable transformation. Only with a sufficient supply of green hydrogen will we be able to leave the fossil age behind us. Nevertheless, over 95% of the current hydrogen production is fossil fuel based due to, for example, the existing viability gap between green and gray hydrogen. So this gives reason to discuss the opportunities of investing in green Power-to-X projects and how to overcome the existing challenges. Due to existing uncertainties in setting up a global hydrogen market, a joint mobilization from public and private actors is absolutely necessary to overcome challenges. Therefore, I would like to welcome our impressive panelists for today's discussion on financing green hydrogen and Power-to-X. And I am sure that it will be extremely insightful to learn from their vast experience today. So let me introduce the panelists of today. And I start with Mr. Karim Lotfi Senaji. He is the CFO of Office Chérifien des Phosphates, OCP SA from Morocco. And he started his career at OCP as a director in charge of management control before holding the position of Vice President Shipment and Logistics. And prior to OCP, Karim held several management positions with several Moroccan and international companies such as Holcim Group, Altadis Morocco, and Medi Telecom. Yeah, welcome, Karim. Then I continue with Christiane Leibach. Christiane Leibach is a board member of KfW Banking Group and responsible for our commercial bank, KfW IPEX-Bank and Development Bank, and our daughter company, Deutsche Entwicklungsgesellschaft, which takes care of promoting private equity in partner countries. So it's all of our international business. So Christiane Leibach is a financial expert with a far-reaching international network and many years of experience in development finance as well as commercial export and project finance. So welcome, Christiane. And then I continue with Andrew Johnston. Andrew is one of the co-founders of Climate Fund Managers. That's a fund from the Netherlands. And prior to Climate Fund Managers, Andrew was the CEO of African Infrastructure Investment Managers, a joint venture of infrastructure investors Macquarie's and Old Mutual, and he was the chairman of Macquarie Africa. Andrew is an experienced professional in the African infrastructure sector and has been involved in the structuring, raising, and deployment of 5 unlisted infrastructure fund vehicles in Africa prior to CFM. So he has a lot of experience to bring to the table. And then we have Mrs. Lavinia Bauer-Ochse. Lavinia is a member of the Corporate Bank Executive Committee at Deutsche Bank. She joined Deutsche Bank more than 20 years ago, and now she's the head of the Environment, Social, Corporate Governance department, and she leads all the sustainability efforts in Deutsche's corporate bank. So, welcome, Lavinia. So, how will this panel take place? We will first hear a statement from all of our panelists introducing us to their involvement on Power-to-X green hydrogen, and we will be starting with Karim, then followed by Christiane, Andrew, and Lavinia. And afterwards, I will engage in a discussion. I have prepared a few questions. There might be some from the audience. You know all how it usually works, and we will take it from there. So I would like to hand over to Karim to start with his statement.
Okay, thank you. First of all, as I said, I'm glad to be here today and thank you for the invitation. I will probably start with a few words about OCP for those who maybe they are not familiar with. So OCP is a global leader in the fertilizer industry. Actually, we are the world's largest exporter of all forms of phosphate, and we focus on maximizing the soil health as well as the farmer productivity by producing customized phosphate-based fertilizer that are sustainably mined, proceed, and applied. So that is on a nutshell who OCP. We have an average turnover, yearly average turnover around $10 billion, and we are almost 20,000 people, mainly based in Morocco. In terms of strategy and vision, I mean, our purpose is to bring phosphorus to life, and that could be done through different channels. But more importantly here, I would like to talk about our strategic goals. So we have 2 main strategic goals that are very linked to the United Nations SDGs, which are fighting the hunger, so the zero hunger or the food security, and climate change. And most of the time, those 2 SDGs are opposite, because We all know that by 2050 we will be almost 10 billion people, so we have to increase the grain and the food production in the world. And in the other side, so far, the agriculture represents 25% of the CO2 emissions. And this is why those two elements are most of the time contradictory, but at OCP, and we have been also working hardly with some international specialists, we think that we can make those two goals going the same direction and through what we call the carbon farming. Actually, by using and applying the good agricultural practices, we can sequestrate carbon in the soil. And this is what we want to achieve here, is that to make sure that we will be teaching and talking to all farmers in the world, and especially we have started in Africa, in order to make them able to sequestrate more carbon in the soil. So beside the revenues that they can do with farming, they will also have additional revenues with carbon farming, because this is something that we can also monetize. And so that's mainly to fix the climate change. And from the food security part, of course, here our role is to make sure that the farmers will have access to what we call the 4 Rs, at the right fertilizer, right time, right rate, and right price. And in order to do so, we are having now an investment program that is a $15 billion investment program, making sure that by 2027 we will be able to produce enough fertilizer that will, of course, follow the demand. But more importantly, sustainability is at the core or the heart of our strategy. And we are committed to reach the zero net carbon emission on scope 1 and 2 by 2030, and on scope 3 by 2040. And we already start. We have some, let's say, step goals, let's say, because in 2026, we committed that 100% of our energy use will be renewable energy. Today, we have 70% of that energy that is already renewable. And also at the same period, we want that 100% of the water we consume that will come from unconventional source water, so mainly desalination, as well as wastewater. But we are investing heavily in new capacities in order to be able to produce by 2026 500 million cubic meters of desal. And in terms of energy, we want also to be able to produce 2 gigawatts of solar and wind energy. Beside that, we have also, and this is the link with the discussion of today, we are also committed to be able to produce 1 million tons of green ammonia by 2027, and by 2032 to reach 3 million tons. And why we are doing so? Because first of all, as I mentioned, it's part of our sustainable development program, but it's also a way to be able to be net zero carbon on the 3 scopes. You need to know that we are the largest consumer of ammonia in the world. So we consume roughly 2 million tons a year. And this is something that is putting us in a very specific situation, because we need to secure the ammonia supply, but at the same time we don't have any assets in the gray ammonia. So going to the green ammonia, that will allow us, first of all, to have a kind of, to secure the supply, but also to have access to ammonia that will be, and we believe, that will be more competitive than the gray ammonia of today. So we have announced this 1 million ton of green ammonia production by 2027. That will require, of course, mainly based on renewable energy, so solar and wind. We are very fortunate in Morocco because Morocco is one of the top 3 places in the world when you have perfect combination between solar and wind. And the beauty of it is that the wind kicks on during the night. So in terms of intermittency, that helps a lot as well. But of course, for doing that, we need finance. Finance will be very important. We are aiming to reach a very competitive costs of hydrogen. We are targeting $1.5 per kilogram by 2032. And in this context, of course, technology will play a key role, but the cost of financing as well. So maybe we will have a chance to exchange around that. I will stop here and let my co-panelists take the floor.
Thank you, Karim. That's a very, very impressive climate strategy you have in a very, very difficult sector. And I pay a lot of respect for that. And we will dig into the challenges you're facing, the sequence you're choosing, and why that is later on in the discussion. So may I now hand over to you, Christiane, and let us know what green hydrogen, Power-to-X, and climate finance, how that all fits together at KfW.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think probably a lot of people are familiar with KfW as one of the largest bilateral development banks. But still allow me a couple of words on how many angles we work on domestically and international, because I think that is, for example, very important when it comes to green hydrogen. So KfW Development Bank is working with developing countries from government to government programs in a lot of more than 120 countries. We have our DEG subsidiary already mentioned, which works with the local sector, the private sector in more than 80 countries. And we have KfW IPEX-Bank as our commercial banking unit, which works with industries around the world and in Germany in terms of international trade and international investments. The reason why I'm saying that, I think it puts us in a quite unique position to understand from different angles what is moving the world today, which is on the one side transformation, obviously, and how in particular transformation of industry can happen and what is needed. And I think green hydrogen shows us very clearly this is a new, very new system, I would like to call it, which needs to be set up. It's infrastructure, it's regulation, it's markets that need to be developed, it's transport that needs to be developed, maybe pipelines that needs to be developed. It needs international cooperation agreements in terms of getting access and trading green hydrogen, for example. And so I think it's a pretty new world we are moving in there, a challenging one, and I think we have been doing only the first steps by now. But still we are very much convinced that it will be one of the decisive factors when it comes to decarbonizing the industry worldwide. And having said that, we're trying to combine all this knowledge, all these insights we have from different angles. For example, and by setting up, and we have been doing that last year, so-called PtX Platform, which we're trying to create and unite all different means and of partners and financings, the government side, the private side, international side, and domestic side. And maybe we elaborate on that a little later, but I think besides all these different stakeholders which are involved in that part, I think what it really and clearly needs when we're moving in such a new world, which is a really major structural change, is some very smart combination of public money and private finance. I think it needs both, and it's one of our ambitious targets to play a role in that, to combine these two instruments.
Yeah, we'll be keen to hear more on the Power-to-X platform as a financing instrument KfW has been facilitated to set up. But before getting into that, Andrew, would you want to share with us what your fund is doing in that particular sector?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much. And Christina, thank you. It was a great setup because I'm going to pick up exactly where you left off. Because Climate Fund Managers has been around for the last 8 years. It in and of itself is an innovative organization, being a joint venture between a development bank, FMO, from the Netherlands, and a commercial financial institution called Sanlam from South Africa, who are Africa's largest non-banking financial institution. So right at its essence, it was sort of a hybrid organization, and its purpose was to actually explore and exploit the evolving technology that subsequently was called blended finance. So we are a blended finance house. What we do is we structure blended finance vehicles. We put them out for consideration to a wide range of investor types. They range from donors through DFIs, through philanthropy, through guarantors, and to the commercial sector. We package this capital into structured vehicles, and anticipating that these vehicles, blended finance, would endure and expand, we set out at the outset to, if we could get the model right, to direct it tactically into core climate sectors, starting with renewable energy in the first instance, then going into water. At that stage, we're going to do agriculture as 3, we're going to do oceans as 4, and cities as 5. This was 8 years ago. Since then, the plans changed somewhat. We didn't even know about hydrogen back then. So we've done now renewable energy, we've done water, which we combined with oceans. So we have water and oceans and sanitation being the second strategy. Our third strategy is hydrogen, which I'll talk to a little bit later on. And then we'll go to cities. It's an experiment in blended finance, and it's working really well. We've raised $2 billion across those 2 strategies over this period of time. We spent 75 of that developing 45 projects. We work really at the early stage. We develop greenfield projects and we finance them into construction and through into operations, and then we exit them and recycle that capital and repeat and rinse. So the success of the model is really how many projects can we build within a finite period of time. 45 currently being developed at the cost of 75 million. Of those 45, we put 12 into construction and are now operating. That's cost us about $700 million of our own capital, of which we've then mobilized another 500 along the way. And strategy 1 is now fully deployed, the renewable energy fund. We partway through water, and we are in the process of establishing quite creative and innovative hydrogen funds dedicated on a regional basis, but I'll give greater detail on that in due course. Oh, there you go.
Oh, no, we need
We have to be very cooperative over here, but we are managing well. Yeah, Lavinia, so why don't you finish up our round of key statements introducing us to Deutsche Bank's activities in the sector?
Very happy to, and thank you very much for having me on the panel. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation, so thank you to KfW. My name is Lavinia Bauer-Ochser. I'm from Deutsche Bank, and Deutsche Bank is the largest commercial bank in Germany. I'm specifically looking after ESG for our corporate clients, for Corporate Bank. And we are covering globally, in total, almost 1 million customers in Corporate Bank. Of course, that's not all the large corp segment. We have a very, very strong foothold in the German Mittelstand and also with the smaller SME clients in Germany. And we are very, very focused and dedicated to the subject of sustainable finance. Our client base is really, it's relevant to our client base, and therefore it's relevant to us. We've committed overall to facilitate a total of 500 billion euros on an aggregate basis until 2025 in sustainable finance. And the energy transition technologies, and hydrogen being one of them, form a major part of that. We do have a very strong proposition in project finance. We have a history of renewable finance projects we were part of, and hydrogen is really for the hard-to-abate industries and our clients which are in those industries a key lever to decarbonization. Maybe just quickly of our advances, we are very proud we issued this year, the first time in October, our transition plan. So our transition plan from a financial services point of view, bringing together how we are operationalizing actually how to decarbonize our corporate loan portfolio, setting ourselves quite ambitious target for reductions of the financed emissions until 2030 in 7 key high-emitting industries, and finding with our clients together ways of how to help them to decarbonize will in the end also help us to achieve our goal, to achieve those interim targets. We are one of the founding members of the Net Zero Banking Alliance and very active also in G-Funds, and therefore we are very actively in those conversations and are looking for projects to be a part of. And maybe to take one statement up front, I've been to the last COPs and I have to say I'm very happy that those conversations are getting way more tangible. We've seen a lot of regulatory framework coming closer, which is helping us all defining what are we meaning by renewable hydrogen, for example, having more clarity around the gas pipelines, for example, which will all help us to get bankability into the projects we are seeking. So I'm very much looking forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Lavinia. So let me just ask a couple of questions in order to dig a bit deeper into this green hydrogen component of your climate strategies. Starting with you, Karim. You hold a 31% market share of the world's phosphate market, and you're such a large producer of fertilizers, and you have a climate strategy. Really, you pointed out the various aspects of it, including the farmers, then including the renewable energy production, and then you said that by 2027 you want to generate as much green ammonia. So why is that last piece, which is relevant for our discussion, why is that so important in your overall climate strategy, and how will you approach it? Because your climate strategy as one of these hard-to-abate industries is really such a complex transformational effort for your organization. Just let us look into that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's working. For us, it's important because, as I mentioned earlier, sustainability is at the core of our strategy and our purpose. This is from one side. But also what is very specific to us, actually, when it comes to sustainability, most of the time we have overcost. Most of the time we are no more as efficient as we could have been using fossil fuels or using other sources of energy. But in our case, it will be different, actually. By using now solar energy, wind energy, that will cost us less compared to the energy we are using today that is mainly based on fossil fuels. That's one thing. The other thing is, even in terms of hydrogen itself, this is very cyclical business related to the gas, and we have seen with the recent evolution with the conflict in Russia and Ukraine, the impact that conflict has and had on the prices of gas and ammonia. So by securing our own source of ammonia and making it very cost competitive, that will also help us in our strategy, because among our strategy, the cost leadership is key. When we are in a commodity business, and being able to be the less or the cheapest producer of fertilizer in terms of cost, that is also very important. So the green ammonia approach is, first of all, in terms of sustainability, then in terms of cost, and also in terms of securing the supply and being able to supply our worldwide customers.
Well, thank you. That sheds some light on as to that for your organization, you think the business case is very clear, no? Also because of the advantages Morocco has in the production of renewables, which is so important for the derivatives we're talking about.
Exactly.
So,
and if you allow me maybe something, because here it's more about our core business today. But when it comes to green hydrogen or green ammonia, Morocco is also well placed towards the European market, and this is also a huge opportunity. So if we manage to be able to find the right technology, because all the elements of this technology are known today. You have the electrolyzers, you have the Haber-Bosch process. But the issue here is to scale up and to be able to produce at very high scale. So, and being able to do so, investing in R&D and making sure that we will be able to do it first for us, but then we also could enter a new business, which is the green hydrogen and the green ammonia business. And in front of it, and especially in Germany, by the way, that is very keen to have a source of supply of green hydrogen and green ammonia. That could be also an upside of what we are doing now.
Yeah, so you can actually combine business cases, your today's core business, and then you have a vision for another business case in the future. So Christiane, when you hear that from one of our clients, so how does that resonate with you? Where does KfW stand with its relevant projects today? And what is KfW's goal in the medium term? No? What do we want to accomplish with our clients?
Yeah, very great what Karim just said, because I mean, we have been working on the green hydrogen initiatives now for maybe 2-3 years, something like that. And we started on a kind of single project basis, having a pilot here and there. For example, in Morocco is one of those with some government money really to start to learn, or with our partners that they are able to learn how to best set that up. We have come and seen some first commercial financings, which are very rare still, if in particular when it comes to large facilities. But you probably all have heard about the NEOM project in Saudi Arabia, where KfW IPEX-Bank is involved. And we have set up other programs and discussed with governments on really developing policies and programs there. But as I said earlier, we came pretty quickly to the conclusion that it needs different instruments, from private money, from government money, for the different stakeholder groups. And so we decided to set up this so-called PtX Platform to be able to serve our partners, government partners, clients in the future in kind of a one-stop shop concept. Yeah, on the one side, providing funds, really, for example, for pilots, for research, for development, for first small projects. But then, as we, I think, all need, government money can only set an incentive there. It cannot be more than that. And it needs to be structured in a way that it de-risks, on the one side, the first projects where we all, or a lot of our partners, need to learn from it. And on the other side, set an incentive to attract more and more private capital and make business cases valid. And this is in the idea of this platform, that we combine, or offer, let's put it better that way, offer on the one side grant elements, government funds, and on the other side move more and more into the private hemisphere and the private sector. And I think that is very important hopefully for our partners. We felt it is a good idea to really learn step by step together what it's need. And I mean, OCP is a very, very large and very economically very profound company. But there might be smaller ones which need even more help. You have you are very professional. You know about all these techniques. But when it comes to a lot of other countries, developing countries, they might need a bit more help in terms of financing and in terms of technologies. And to combine that is one of our targets, to be that they are able to serve their own markets, and in the perspective to serve the export markets. And honestly, we feel still that we have a very good basic idea, but we wanted to create that more as a, let's say, learning experience as well, because I think we need to all together develop how much grants are needed, what is needed in terms of equity financing, what is needed in terms of loan financing and guarantees in de-risking projects. So the platform is created the way that we can offer all that, but it's not clearly set for a good reason, because we think we need to be flexible and understand what is needed at a certain point of time when the market is developing over the years to come.
Yeah, you rightfully pointed out that we are at a stage where we are helping to pilot, we are helping to start activities, get them started. There are countries where the framework conditions are great, like in Morocco. There are other actors who are trying out certain approaches, but this is not the ramp up. The ramp up will have to happen in the future. And Andrew, that's my question to you. CFM is investing in renewable energies in emerging and developing economies, you've explained to us, and you are going to be involved in the development of green hydrogen in Namibia. That's another place where renewable energy production is quite blessed, let's put it that way. What is your view on the green hydrogen market ramp up? How will it be funded, and how can emerging economies benefit and participate best in that?
Excuse me. Well, thanks for that question. I think we see the market as being like this flock of swallows, you know, that when the sun goes down and there's just a swarm of swallows that they all sort of fly in unison, but it's made up of millions of them. It's not like one big animal that sort of works on a certain thing, but it's rather a orchestra of lots of players doing all sorts of things. But there are basically three things that when we look at this, that like any business or any market, you need primarily a demand, you need a supply to satisfy that demand, and you need something in between to connect those two dynamics. And the emerging markets has a role to play in all three of those, both the generation of demand, the provision of supply, as well as the dynamic connecting the dots. It's true to say at the moment that the demand, which is driven in large part by things like the obvious push factors, climate change, evidence through policy formulation, evidence through strategies of net zero, turning to regulation. That's really where the main demand pull is, in large part, but the demand is also being created in emerging markets as countries like Namibia, South Africa, Morocco are actually pivoting their own economic plans around a sustainable dividend and a sustainable pivot. So while we think that all the revenues are going to derive from the DMs, the developed markets, and the export market for hydrogen generated in emerging markets, it's not exclusively that. We're seeing a lot of demand being driven domestically as they defossilize their own industry, decarbonize their own industries, and start generating domestic demand. So the demand is evolving and emerging in both sides of the south and the north. On the supply side, it's true to say that it's probably dominated by emerging markets. That's where the natural resources are, that's where the energy resources are, it's where the wind, the solar, and the space. So I think that what's also happening there is on the demand side, on the supply side, the physical componentry, the technology, is probably still dominated by the DMs as opposed to EMs, but we are seeing a shift. We are seeing a development and a shift of local technology, local industrialization, and local manufacture, but it's still very much a DM thing as opposed to EM. And I'd say that also on the supply side, financing is probably gravitating more around the DMs than the EMs. There's a shift from donor capital to emerging markets. There's a shift of commercial capital enabled by this type of enabling capital from the north to the south. And so emerging markets do have a role to play because some of them do in fact have deep capital markets themselves, like South Africa. Now, the final thing then is this connective tissue. You need something in the middle to actually connect those dots. And that connective tissue is in fact risk. It's a definition of risk, because absent a clear definition of risks, no decisions are made, and if there's no decision made, you don't get the supply to go to the demand. And I think emerging markets have a very, very important role to play in defining what risk means in respect to the sector. And to the extent that that risk can be articulated through the type of instruments that Christine is talking about, equity, debt, guarantees, and across various stages of life, whether it's early stage, mid stage, late stage, or whether the access point is private markets or public markets, that whole Rubik cube that I've described is really a Rubik cube of risk. And if you can define that in a local manner, so the capital will be able to make decisions and the technology will make decisions, and that Rubik Cube is very place-based. The Rubik Cube for Namibia and Egypt and Namibia and South Africa is different for each of them, and I think they've got to grasp that responsibility, because that's the medium for making these decisions.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. You really pointed out well what the roles of the various economies are in this effort to transform energy production, and also our industries, which are dependent on those. So I'm really interested to hear Deutsche Bank's perspective. I mean, you are the largest financial institution in Germany, but at the same time globally active in many markets. So having heard what Andrew just pointed out, what role does investment in these green hydrogen projects play for Deutsche Bank, and which strategy do you have in helping German clients to transform and at the same time help the market ramp up of the green hydrogen production where that takes place, basically?
Thank you so much. And I think listening to all my previous panelists' outlines, it really underlines that we need all the market participants, including also the producers, to come together and think these projects through, in particular at the beginning. I've outlined already hydrogen will play a key role for our clients in decarbonizing their own processes. I'm often asked, hydrogen is not a new technology. It's an energy carrier which is around for many, many years. Why do we find it also difficult to finance hydrogen projects? And we've touched on some of the criteria just between the different regions, but there are more angles to the different risks associated. And we are still in the phase where we really come together and need to come together in lighthouse projects to understand the risks associated and how to de-risk and mitigate and distribute those risks. So in the end of the day, hydrogen, when it comes to renewable hydrogen, is really about a large-scale ramp-up of renewable energy plus electrolysis, and you have the additional risks of either country risks or also project risk, because you have project-on-project risk, and therefore you have dependencies within the project. And for example, we've taken a step 2.5 years ago, and we're one of the founding members of H2 Global, to really address supply and demand in that chain, to take some of the risk out there, because we need, on the one hand side, certainty when it comes to taking investments now, because everybody's expecting advances in the efficiencies of new technologies developing over the next years. So if you now take an investment decision, you want to have price certainty for the hydrogen you're producing. On the other hand side, if you are asked to adapt your processes with large-scale capex, you need to have also supply certainty on the prices for the hydrogen you're getting. So really, one of the things we are seeing as very important is to think supply and demand at the same time in order to ramp up and create a robust market. Secondly, I've mentioned we have various risks. There are still a lot of questions around the transport, about the right derivatives to focus on. We need, and there are a lot of permit issues. There will be time lags in order to have the infrastructure set up, even though we have seen a lot of advances about the hub structures in the different regions. But still, at the first steps, I think we will see, and that's what we do at the moment, we will see integrated projects. So we will see projects which are near site to production, where the hydrogen is being produced very close to the actual end user who's integrating hydrogen in their production processes. So you take out the transport cost and the transport risks for the time being, and can learn just from those developments, because we really need to find projects which are large scale. Successfully scaling up is one of the key risks at the moment, and we are very happy to engage in some projects which are currently coming together, even though we can't speak about them yet. But building that capacity and capability is really key across all the stakeholders which are needed in order to get the financing and bankability across. Because at the end of the day, the projects need to be commercially viable. But at the beginning, we need to take these first steps to really learn along the process and get this understanding across.
Yeah, you rightfully underlined projects where, the renewable energy is being produced where it's needed. No? Like in Karim's example, I mean, that's a perfect example for such the demand is generated in Morocco itself, and those are the projects which are probably, very, very significant and important for this ramp up. But Andrew, let me pick on you once more. We are now getting more into the financing bit, digging into what our clients need in terms of financing for these challenging projects. So which solutions have you developed with your clients, or do you foresee for your clients interested in Power-to-X projects? What are they asking for, the ones interested in these projects? Where do they need your help?
Okay, we think of clients from two perspectives. As a fund manager, we sort of have a duty of care to providers of capital, and then we also have a duty of care to the recipients of those capitals. So let me actually start with the capital end of that question, if I may. So what investors want, they want access. First and foremost, they want access to the opportunity. They read about the opportunity, they hear about it in the credit committees, they see it in the press, and they want access to it. So they can get access through a couple of ways. They can get on a plane and go meet people, or they can go through intermediaries like banks and fund managers and the likes. The challenge that they have is every organization has a defined risk appetite. And so their journey to the destination is really quite a challenging one, because they don't really know what the ambient risk profile is of that landscape, but they are constrained by their own risk appetite. So what we've tried to do is define that landscape in these certain risk allocations. So we have taken from the world of infrastructure financing 3 defined phases of project maturity, being the development stage, the construction stage, and the operation stage, which is already well understood from a risk perspective. The markets know that the former is more risky than the latter, and there's enough evidence out there to actually try to dimension that. The consequence of that risk is a corresponding return requirement. So if we're going to do more risk, I want more return. That's also well defined. So we've started with that and said, let's create a access point for early stage development, a separate access point for construction stage, and a separate access point for the mature stage. 3 separate funds, but interlinked. In addition to that, within each of those stages, and specifically construction stage, construction is fraught with all sorts of unknowns. You know, you can get the numbers wrong, you can get the timing wrong, get the technology wrong. There are all sorts of things. But you can split that into certain risk profiles as well through an architecture blending, whereby that risk is shared in a tactical manner. So we've done that as well. So even within the construction stage, we may to bifurcate the risk and give that access to investors. So when we go out and talk to an investor, we actually offer 5 different access points into the same project, which lets different investors type a response. So currently within our $2 billion, we have roughly 23 investors, and these include 5 governments, 5 development finance institutions, philanthropy, and commercial investors. And they choose which of those 5 seats they want to sit on because it suits their risk appetite. And so that's quite sophisticated. It's sophisticated and it's niche. So as a result, it's quite difficult to scale. And what we've done is we've replicated that model for renewable energy and water and now into the hydrogen space. But it is actually quite effective because it responds to local capital, international capital. So that's what we've offered the product, talking about our clients being the provider of capital. On the other clients being the seekers of that capital, we've sought to fill those gaps which are required, being the development fund and the construction fund. And what we hope to deliver with them is agility, to actually get them the money when they need it. And so through blended finance, we sort of redefined what bankability means. We've said, if you can get a project to this stage and we're part of that journey as a co-developer, we can almost determine and prescribe what bankability means, which is the stage at which our construction fund will then deploy. And so we can get projects into construction a lot quicker. So in summary, our clients providers of capital. I think we give them access points which suit their own risk profile, and our clients being the seekers of capital, we think we give them money when they need it in an agile way through blended finance.
That sounds like a thought out concept, and also catering for different needs of clients at different stages. And of course, green hydrogen power to X is still an early stage technology. And Christiane, the PtX Development Fund caters for that early stage. And you described how we have grants for R&D efforts, for piloting. But you were also talking about de-risking, and that comes into play when investments get larger. And so what evidence do we, as KfW, have to gather in order to find the right de-risking approaches when we want to help ramping up green hydrogen production? Can you maybe also look into experience from other sectors in order to kind of draw an analogy here?
Yeah, I think it's at the moment still quite challenging, because I think I wanted to refer to what Lavinia said, and this is about what kind of a market will build up in terms of pricing. I mean, Karim, you mentioned that you have something like a target price already in mind from your experience, from your production, from whatever, and knowing how cheap you can produce energy by wind and solar, which I think is a very, very good starting point. Yeah. But on the other side, we don't know yet, and I think that's one of the really crucial parts. And a lot of those industrial companies that would be interested in buying hydrogens, they would feel still today, I would think they are not yet prepared to sign a long-term contract. Yeah. So we have like this hen and egg problem, the classical one, I'd say, that we have on the one side the producers which want to produce hydrogen, which know something about their costs, some more, some less, but still have question marks on a market, on infrastructure. They don't know yet how to get the hydrogen from the place of production to the client. And on the other side, we have the potential client who doesn't want to and can't write a check because he doesn't know whether he really gets the hydrogen and at which price and at what price. And I think that's one of the core elements here of a very unique risk structure. Yeah, and and I think there probably it will need some form of a government intervention, at least for a particular period of time, to give confidence to potential buyers that they have a de-risking, let's say a de-risking instrument at hand, which de-risks that part of the story. I think, as I said, I think that's for me the core element of the risk at the moment, besides all the technological infrastructure and so on and so forth. Topics we have been already discussing, and I think there it needs some contracts, be it with a blended, be it with a guarantee instrument, be it covering political and or economic risk, really to bridge these, in particular, potential first years of green hydrogen markets. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
If you allow me, just
I was going to
jump on that, because this is a key point here when it comes to de-risking, making sure that you have an output buyer that will come and take the product. And this is where OCP has a very specific position here, because as I mentioned, we are the largest buyer of ammonia. 2 million tons a year, we will reach 3 million tons in 4 years' time. So we can de-risk a part of this ammonia production that we will do. And this is exactly how we want to handle that, because all my co-panelists, they are right. At the end of the day is, okay, are we able to construct the plant? Are we able to produce? And what will be the cost of this production? And when when you are able to make sure that you already deliver plants. You already have all the means in terms of solar and wind, and you're also able to capture the first risk on the first volumes, because the way we are approaching things, this project is, let's start with 200,000 tons of ammonia. And then even if it's 30% more expensive than the gray ammonia, it doesn't matter. We need 3 million tons. We can absorb the difference. And that will help us to de-risk with the financial institution, and also it will help us to start working with technology owners, making sure that we will be able to find the right technology. So the way we will approach that is we will work with several technology owners on small volumes, let's say between 30 or 50,000 tons of ammonia, and making sure that we will find the right technology. Maybe we will co-develop with them, and then from 200,000 we will move to 1 million, and then from 1 million again, having several technologies there in competition, again making sure that we have the right one, and then we move to 3 million tons, and then it's another story. But the key point here is who will bear the risk, the first risk of the first volumes. And this is where we have this specific situation at OCP, because we said we can take this risk and we can manage to absorb that. That's
if I may add to that, yeah, and I think you as OCP, and I think there are not too many others in the world, can play a very decisive role there in building up a market, yeah, or at least getting in the first steps of a market. And I think it will be more challenging. You mentioned some countries which are developing without an industrial basis, yeah, trying to build up their green hydrogen markets, both for their local production as well for export. And I think there it gets way more challenging than when you have an industrial base which can be built. You can build it up on.
I think there's another interesting observation one can make. I'm not sure where the conclusion of this lies, but if you look at sectors that shot the lights out in terms of penetration and acceleration of all forecasts, like telcos, for instance, or solar panels and cost production of those, what both of those evidenced is a aggressive pursuit of miniaturization and fragmentation of deployment. So putting the ability Uber in your hand through miniaturization and digitization. So those are things that have worked well in terms of market creation and market explosion. That's the first point. The second point is the world going forward is undoubtedly more uncertain than the world that was behind. And as a result of that, the tenor of financing tends to come closer. So financing becomes shorter, and therefore one needs to look for models which can actually be deployed quicker and on pieces of equipment that have a shorter useful life. Now, both of these things, these two characteristics, are counter to the mega-scale utility facilities we're actually building in the sector. And the reason why we're building mega hyperscale facilities is because of the urgency driven by climate change. But I think there is an interesting pivot point, which is going to be driven by both technology as well as financing, that it's possible that the deployment of hydrogen in 50 years' time or 30 years' time is going to be miniaturized and going to be in a more sort of regional, if not rural level, as opposed to the big facilities we're building at the moment, which I think will change it quite a lot. I don't know how we get from there to there, but I wouldn't be surprised to look back and see that that's what's happened.
Yeah, that's an interesting connection you're drawing there, like the world becoming faster and faster, and climate change being such a pressing issue that kind of influences the tenors of financings. But of course it's a logic conclusion there. Let me bring Lavinia back into the conversation. So how does that resonate with you, what you've just heard? Like, does Deutsche Bank offer special instruments to respond to growing demand from green hydrogen? And how does Deutsche Bank rate those projects from a commercial standpoint?
Thank you so much. I've briefly touched on it earlier already. So I think in terms of special instruments, when we look into hydrogen, it really requires classical project finance and ECA finance for the technologies involved. Still, the risks we mentioned earlier, we saw that really the initiative from the German government to found H2 Global was a key lever and also a lighthouse internationally recognized to take some of the supply and demand risks out of the system. In order to get the projects bankable, we really need to have long-term offtake agreements, and the insecurities around pricing and production are looked at in those. So we see the first auctions happening in H2 Global on both sides. And clients are very appreciated about that. And also we see the developments with the EU Hydrogen Bank, which are basically following those proposals. So we got actively engaged in those because we saw them as a key lever to overcome these insecurities. A second, what Christiana already mentioned, the PtX platform is really also key in those considerations, because what's actually missing at the moment is equity. We are a debt provider, so we are building on existing equity structures and are coming in for the later financings. And with those, as I mentioned, it's more project finance consideration with the speciality that we have, in many cases, a project risk to consider. So we have, on the one hand side, the renewable elements, and then also the additional elements of conversions and electrolysis. And that's really something where we need to build capabilities. So I would less think about instruments. I would more think about capabilities and competencies, and also capacities, really on all sides. I think we are learning from those projects we are seeing at the moment and getting engaged in. And it's now a matter that we really are seeing developments running simultaneously, because for now we are fine to learn from those projects we are seeing, but we will need a phase in particular with the 2030 targets, which regions have set themselves to overcome and prepare for the next investments needed. So in particular, the adoption of gas pipelines, for example, the whole infrastructure needed to transport the derivatives of hydrogen will really need to be the next step to look into, to mention one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and this has been an extraordinary active panel, also commenting on each other. I'm amazed and very, very happy about that. But now it's time also to ask our audience, are there any questions you would like to ask to these panelists? And there's a microphone coming. Yeah? Wonderful. And here the lady in the first row.
Thank you very much for the comprehensive and insightful perspective shared on green finance by such experts from DFIs, producers, commercial lenders, and funds. You've already touched upon this question, but if you can summarize, like, what are the key technological developments that are required to reduce the cost of green hydrogen? And if different financing structures are necessary to support those innovations.
Who would like to take that one? Karim.
Yeah. Actually, what makes those projects, first of all, I would like to say that the financial community is really, really willing to invest. But then the second step is in which conditions. And we talked about the risk. So we have different types of risk. The first one is the technology. The technology is not yet there in order to produce at scale. I think, if I'm not mistaken, probably the maximum volume produced in one plant so far is between 100 and 150,000 tons, and here we are talking about millions. So the technology risk is still there. At OCP we feel confident because we run many roadshows and we are in discussion with many technology owners, and we have our own R&D. So we feel that in a short period of time we will be able to find solution. especially on the electrolyzers, because when it comes to solar energy and wind energy, this is something that already under control. The cost of production of those energy are very low today compared to where they were in 10 years' time. So it's specific to the electrolyzers. And from that point of view, then it's about how you convince your financial partners of your ability to fix or to find the solution. And of course, from that point of view, as long as the technology is not yet proven, it's more about being confident or not by working with someone. From OCP point of view or angle, we feel pretty confident. We have some support from that aspect, but as Christiana mentioned earlier, I think that in terms of financing, it's time today to have more public finance, more grants, and then the private sector will come. And also from a producer point of view, we need to be more transparent, because those guys need to have some inside information to be reassured on how things are moving and doing, and this is where I think, and this is what my co-panelists said also, we need to work together and to share where we are going, at which stage are we. And finally, what I would like to say as well is what Robert mentioned in terms of flexibility, having people that can finance in different stage of the project. That's also very, very useful, very helpful, because then you don't have to take all. You can choose, and depending on how you are viewing the risk and which type of risk you want to take, then you have different finance institutions behind. That's something. Exactly.
I would love to underline what Karim said. I think the major issue is really about scale. So finding large-scale industrial-sized production, but also being able, oh, I think I lost the mic. Does it work? No? Okay, sorry. Having large-scale industrial-sized production, but also proving the integration into industrial processes. So it really is on both sides still at large scale something where the proof points are still for us to look for. So once these advances are made, that's going to be a major step forward. Secondly, it's really about efficiencies. So it's to be expected that the electrolysis capacities and efficiencies will go up. And if you look into research, it's also very easily predictable that green hydrogen prices will come down in production in comparison to all others. So those advances are foreseeable. I think we are on a good track there. But really scaling up and having that in those amounts and sizes which we will need in order to achieve, it will really require to think holistically, because it doesn't only require production in those countries which really have like the benefit of all the natural resources to produce renewable at large scale. It will require all viable solutions to come together, because we will also have to overcome the transport issue for some time and the costs associated with transport.
So I'm going to take a bit of a liberal use of the word technology, but I think there are two features about this market which are quite unique. One is the role of common use infrastructure, in that unlike other type of assets and markets, the dependency and interconnection between common use infrastructure between different projects and the dependency on it is much more integrated, and I think we need a standard and scalable way of financing and procuring common use infrastructure. The second thing is there is no EPC wrap in this. You know, you can't wrap a wind farm with an electrolyzer, with an ammonia, and with a pipeline. So for the financial markets, trying to get their head around a split contract aggregated model which manages the interfaces is fundamentally important, because if we wait for a wrap, it's never going to happen.
Okay. Are there more questions? Yes, please. No, first you, and then pass it on, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Felicia. I work as Chief Finance Officer at Rwanda Green Fund, which is actually a fund that is trying to use like a branded model in terms of financing those green and technology initiatives. We have started one of the fund, and now we have capitalized about 270 million USD. That is having a guarantee side. It has grant side, but also it has a credit line. Why I'm going to say that is that when you're looking like MDPs and development partners, looking which structure that can make the cost of finance accessible. I mean, even to leverage the private capital to come. We are not seeing maybe a lot putting money in in the grants to make sure actually they are de-risking those commercial loans actually to attract them to come to finance a certain project. So maybe I want to ask on the fund manager side, is there now like a proposed combination structure in terms of optimization of financing those kind of projects? Maybe what kind of percentage do we need in terms of maybe like grants versus loans or even guarantees, so that actually we can make like a reference case? That is first. The second is also how I mean, development banks like KfW can also, I'm trying to ask KfW side, can maybe like allow instruments that is simultaneously have an objective of bringing maybe the private capital, what kind of maybe leverage ratio sometimes you are looking, so that maybe we can bring also those private capital providers on board. Thank you.
Maybe we take these questions, or maybe you ask your question as well, please.
Okay. Yeah, firstly, apologies. My name is Pradeep Tharakan. I'm ADB's Director of Energy Transition. I was supposed to be on that panel. The last one finished in the other end of the world and then just getting here. But I'm so glad that I missed the panel because I'm able to sit here and actually listen. But just briefly, I think as from the development bank's standpoint, I think the panelists, you talked about two major types of projects, right? You've got the very large export-oriented projects, and NEOM's a great example, but it's a very unique example. You've got a massive sovereign behind it. You've got all of Saudi Arabia's solar resources, and you've got a long-term offtake contract. Countries like India are talking about these sorts of projects, and we are beginning to look at some of them, and there are so many questions we have. I mean, we've talked about all of them. The second is sort of, produce it where you use it. I think the H2 steel project in Sweden is a great example. And as you mentioned, there are some good, sort of innovations around where some of the off-takers are now equity holders, so they get an upside. Karim, you went as far as saying we can manage the risk by supporting, but you didn't go as far as saying maybe we could even take an equity stake, so that if the price goes down, at least you've got an upside from the generation. But the third element, and I think it was briefly mentioned, is smaller decentralized hydrogen projects. It'll be good to hear. I mean, in the power sector, we went through this whole circle, right? We built massive centralized projects, and then we said, oops, we got to go back to decentralized, closer to demand. I wonder if you're missing that loop in hydrogen by focusing only on the first two. And as a development bank, and KfW and ourselves, is there an opportunity for biomass to hydrogen for development impact, in the developing world? And just wanted to get some. And then what are the issues? Because those are going to be project finance. You've got smaller players, harder to get credit and all of that. So it's not a question. It's more of a comment.
Yeah, but thank you, Pradeep, for coming and joining us. And you're such a loyal friend now, asking all your questions and making your contribution this way, which we missed a lot on this panel. But I can very much empathize with the distances you have to cover on this campus. So don't worry about that. Thank you for your question. So who would like to start on which question?
So I'll take the one on how much donor capital do you need? And this is tested repeatedly in blended finance architectures. There's no single answer, I'm afraid, but there are a couple of guidances. One is the earlier stage you are in the project life stage, development, pre-fees type of stuff, the more development capital you require and grant capital, and the later stage, the less you require, if indeed any. Broadly speaking, the industry standard is around about 20%. From construction stage onwards, the most you need is probably about 20%, because you should be able to get your forecasts pretty much accurate enough to 20% up or down. You should. Now, the other guidance is that donor capital doesn't want to go it alone. They want to see a mobilization characteristic, and the expectation out there is probably about 8 to 10 times. So every dollar of donor, you need to go and mobilize, which means that the risk profile of the project at that point in time, or in that jurisdiction, all the technology you've got to do, is still going to be sufficient for your 80% and your other $7 that you've got to augment to it. So there's no single answer, but it's within that parameter.
Yeah, maybe on Pradeep, but I think you have described it so very accurate and very knowledgeable. Yeah, I think it's 3 groups, and as you said, and I can only agree on that. And on the last part, that is really an interesting question, as you phrased it. And I think, as you said, there is no definitive answer. I think it's worthwhile thinking about in that direction. Yeah. Because, I mean, let's look at it from another point of view. I mean, if you started to more develop a country towards an industrialization, it would be very good to start from the very beginning, thinking of the green hydrogen perspective. If you got one on your country, I think it all depends how your wind and solar how your land is and how good it is for wind and solar. Because, I mean, let's get clear. I mean, green hydrogen without a very efficient and very good location for having wind parks and solar wouldn't work. Yeah. So I think we will see countries which are very close to that setup, and we do see countries which just don't have that. Yeah. Don't have these resources in terms of good opportunities for wind and solar. And I think in that sense, what all you were describing, I think you come, even if you go layer down, you have more scenarios as much deeper you dig into the matter. Yeah. And I think we don't have yet an answer to all of that. But I think what I think is important, that in particular the 2 first groups you were mentioning, the bigger industrials and the places and hydrogen, not for export but more for local, I think we have to start somewhere, because I think it still needs more knowledge in terms of technology. It needs more knowledge in terms of how market develops. And I think there's nothing about it than just moving ahead and starting it and learning from it by experience. Yeah. But I think we will see way more diversified market and regions in the decades to come. Yeah. I think it's more a question of decades, not of years. Yeah.
I would love to add to that. I totally agree. But also, I think just in the small scale on-site production, decentralized production, I think that will be the way how to overcome really the investment challenge we will have for the transport element. So the whole infrastructure questions, because they will take so much time with regards to permitting, also developing those technologies, what are needed. So while I think the whole hub logic, which is becoming clearer, makes a lot of sense, it will take some time. And on the way, I think apart from the large-scale projects, we will see some local decentralized developments happening. But I agree fully with Christiana. We have at the moment really also still the learning need across the industry to learn from the large-scale projects we are coming together now.
Maybe just to mention 2 things. First of all, we are in the equity, as OCP. We are developing that, so we are part of the game. But what I would like to tell you about those small-scale projects, actually, to produce hydrogen is very, very energy intensive. So you will need, and especially if you want to produce it through the solar energy and wind energy, you need a lot of huge number of lands in order to be able to produce at scale. So this is why I don't think that as far as the hydrogen with the actual technology or the one we are working in, it will allow us to have small production of hydrogen. You will have like the NEOM or IDEAL or what we also have already announced. If you have to make it at scale if you want to be competitive, otherwise it will be difficult. And then you have also the question of the transportation. But from that aspect, the good news is the shipping industry maybe will be able to swift and to start using green ammonia as a carburant, which can also help. But pipelines, at least from Morocco perspective, it will be more focused on a pipeline from Morocco to Europe in order to solve this transportation issue.
Pradeep, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I would love more information on the PtX platform, but that we can take that offline. No worries.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, more questions. I saw a couple of more hands. Yeah? Yeah, and the lady first, and then you pass it on to the gentleman sitting.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for the panel and all your insights. My name is Imogen Outlaw from New Climate Institute based in Cologne, Germany. And my question is not only on the decarbonization potential, but really on the benefit that this can bring to the country. And the question I have is, particularly when we're talking about public finance and the role of public finance here, how can public finance, or what role should public finance play in ensuring domestic value creation in these countries, and kind of ensuring that there is some kind of value chain created in this country, particularly if we're looking at a case like Namibia, where there is not really an industry or demand at the moment. And second question I have is, again, we're talking a lot of the strategies right now are really focused on export. And I guess this is more of a comment of, do we think that there will be appetite for only kind of raw, if you allow me to use that term, raw H2, raw green hydrogen, or will we also see in the future appetite for products, importing products that are maybe of higher value creation for these countries, like green steel, et cetera?
Right away.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Till Tresker. Thank you so much for the insightful discussion. You talked about how the scale-up of production and increased efficiencies when it comes to technology really helps to bring down production costs in the future, or are expected to bring down production costs. I wonder how much of a dilemma does this actually create, and what is kind of like the notion you get when talking to developers when it comes to like whether one should wait for these technological advances to actually take place and then start production in, let's say, 10 years.
And maybe you pass the mic to the gentleman sitting in front, yes? And that's the last question I will take then. So please, go ahead.
So, first of all, thank you very much for this panel. So, as you know, the green hydrogen sector is emerging market. So, from the perspective of the commercial bank and financing, are you looking the PowerTX project as classical project finance? And do you need to assess all the risk, or you are already more flexible, and you could accept less risk without impacting the cost of financing? And what kind of risk that you could accept compared to the classical project finance?
Maybe I start with the question of the young lady. Well, without sounding a little pessimistic sometimes, but when we travel the world quite a bit and with customers and partners in more than 100 countries. And what sometimes makes me a little nervous is there's barely not any country, not one country that doesn't talk about green hydrogen at the moment. No matter how good the perspectives are and how good the potential business case might be. And what I mean by that, you raised some of the issues, is there a good spot for wind? Is there a good spot for solar? Is there any means, not only in terms of financial capabilities, but in capabilities to set up these projects from a technical point of view, from a project management point of view, yeah? And that makes me sometimes a little nervous, because what I would be nervous about is that countries not having these expertise and knowledge trying to do that, and then end up in a way that all these projects are in the hand of others, yeah, because they don't have their own means of really making their decisions on it, and so on and so forth. I mean, there is something about it, as I said, which makes me nervous, yeah. I mean, I think you still have to move forward, and if you want to create your future, you sometimes have to take certain risks, yeah. But I think from an overall perspective, it would be, at least in theory, good to focus on those countries and on those business cases which are most valuable and probably show the best value. Start from there and not start with the most difficult circumstances and the most challenging perspectives. It's a very generalizing answer, but really, I mean, there's barely not one country that doesn't talk about green hydrogen at the moment, yeah.
I think public sector capital should be spent in those areas where the benefit is shared amongst many. So common use infrastructure, studies that go to resource studies, permitting, land use, policy, that's where I think it should go. And I think it should also go on the peripheral of the main core infrastructure themes. I'm going to come back to your project finance question, is that I don't think the private sector needs public sector capital to stitch together a project finance plan. We know how to finance these things. They're interfaces that we can get our heads around. So there may be some spongy money that's required to actually manage the risk between an interface, but I think it needs to be in the early stage, and it needs to be on the peripherals of it, so that governments don't buy molecules, or they shouldn't. It's not the molecule they're going to buy. They need to maybe facilitate the passage of that molecule into the impact it's got to deliver. I want to pivot to your question. Is it pure project finance? I don't think it is. If you look at the funding structures of these projects, there's public sector support all over it. There's public sector support in the revenue line through not differential swaps, I've got these on my brain, for contracts for difference. Donor capital, it's going in. MDB money is going in via sovereigns with a guarantee. If you unpick it, yes, a lot of the liquidity is coming from the private sector, but a lot of the support and the credit enhancement and the certainty and the risk allocation is actually going to the public sector balance sheets. So is it project finance? Well, not really. You know, project finance is meant to be zero or limited recourse. There's not a lot of limited recourse in these first projects.
I just maybe answering the young guy there. In terms of, if I understood well, your question is, do we first have to develop the technology and to see at which price we can produce and then start investing? And I would answer, it's all about incentive. Are you incentivized to do it quicker or not? And as the OCP group, we are very incentivized because, first of all, we have a clear sustainability strategy. We want, as I mentioned earlier, to be net zero carbon by 2030. And also, we do believe that we can produce green and at more competitive cost than the gray of today. And by having being sure of that, this is why we are committed to work on it and trying to be able to produce as soon as possible. And actually, we ask ourselves the same question. Do we have to start with 1 million tons, or do we have to start with lower volumes and then look at the technology, or do we have to wait until the technology is proven? And what we decided to do is let's go and learn and try and make it at industrial levels, because 200,000 tons, it's pretty good levels. And from that, it's exactly what happened in the photovoltaic business and the wind business. I mean, they started, the cost was 10 times what the cost is today, and it will be the same. But for that, you need an industrial ecosystem, and you need also the output buyer. This is where we have this key role to play as a group.
Maybe just briefly adding to that, to your question, because you really hit one of the key concerns also with your question. And one of the answers are really systems like H2 Global or the European Hydrogen Bank, because they are, at least for the beginning and for the first volumes, taking out that risk and are contributing to that price and are helping to set a price target which helps the producers to have some clarity around their production cost, but also guarantee the supply for the demand side.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to close the session, since our time is up, by thanking this very engaged, very active, and very cooperative panel. Commenting on each other. It was a joy really moderating you, and assuring you as well that we have taken away some very valuable insights on the opportunities and challenges of transforming to green hydrogen. We have learned, for instance, we've learned lots of things, but for instance, advances in technology are still needed, and we have financing instruments in place in order to help with the early stage, and climate fund managers has a very well thought through financing instrument in place, helping at various stages of project development. Deutsche Bank commented project finance is really what's needed, really non-recourse, but in this industry also the government assistance is very much needed at this stage still. We learned that emerging markets, not only can they supply, but of course they can benefit best if they create the demand at home, and we've seen a very good example of that from OCP in Morocco, how the vision is there to use the green hydrogen derivatives at the spot. And we have learned that integrated project concepts are crucial. And because sometimes transport is involved, sometimes it's not. So let's all work towards grasping the opportunities and working on moving away the existing barriers. Hopefully this sector will advance quickly. And with that, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much, and also thank you for your very good questions and your contributions from... Yeah, exactly. That is, it was really perfect today. Thank you very much.
And you weren't planted, were you? You just have to beat it.
Institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment, and climate strategy. Offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation. Supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda. Mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals: knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of public development banks. How does it work? All year long, the club is working on contributing to the international agenda, coordinating working groups on SDGs, gender, climate, and biodiversity, releasing common strategic and operational publications, and reporting their annual commitment towards climate and biodiversity. IDFC. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC Climate Facility? Created in 2019, the facility has been supporting IDFC members in enabling knowledge exchange and offering capacity development on climate-related topics. Our 3 goals: to strengthen climate finance expertise and capacities, to originate and develop joint climate projects, to institutionalize and facilitate collaborative work among members on climate change. Our activity lines: knowledge sharing, capacity building, access to international climate finance, joint business opportunities. In the past couple of years, the IDFC had been supporting members in mainstream common principles on mitigation and adaptation, developing a framework for the operationalization of the Paris Agreement alignment, promoting a mentoring program between institutions, delivering climate toolbox including GHG accounting, climate risk assessment, Paris Agreement alignment and climate strategy, offering trainings on climate risk assessment, climate strategies, and adaptation, supporting events and partnerships to the international agenda, mobilizing resources and facilitating joint business opportunities and project proposal. IDFC Climate Facility. Let's work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals towards 2030 and beyond. What is IDFC? The International Development Finance Club, created in 2011, is a network of 26 public development banks. Our mission? Speaking with a common voice, to leverage a greater impact in major international debates, and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our goals: knowledge sharing and capacity building among the IDFC institutions, enhanced collaboration between members and partners, and pursuing advocacy on the role of